podcast.
So, welcome back to Behind the Screens. I'm Ina, and for this episode, we will deep dive into the truth behind running a business with real support, real systems, and real strategy.
And I'm Steph. I'm a nurse turned entrepreneur and real estate investor. And we're going to be diving into a topic that honestly comes up a lot in my DMs, discovery calls, in person meetups, client consults.
Yes, and today's episode is so needed. We're talking about delegation, but specifically the difference between accountability and ownership. Because we've seen this stuff, right? Over and over again, where tasks are actually delegated, but nobody actually owns them.
Right. So let's clarify this because there's a lot of people out there, our listeners, who are like, aren't they the same thing? What's the point? Why is this important? And before we dive right into it, I want to mention, how it's all about the foundations of your business, right? Same as a house. If the foundation isn't good, the rest of the build isn't going to be as solid. So to put it simply, we're kind of going on basics, but it's these fundamentals that if you can seriously get them right and really understand it, you can instill this into your own team so that when you are delegating a role, a task, a project, or what have you, it's going to be so much smoother. So it goes way more than beyond, just giving somebody a task, a job, a role, but really having it to where they understand not just the actual, what is the goal of getting this done, but the responsibility and the ownership that they have over the results because they are the ones that are doing the role. So to clarify, ownership, it means somebody taking full responsibility for the outcome. Whereas accountability is somebody's in charge of the execution or the follow through. But the catch is that, most people, they assign tasks, but they don't assign ownership.
So that's facts. I had actually this real estate team recently, one of our clients. They actually delegated the lead generation task to their virtual assistant. And honestly, the VA was doing all the steps, but no one was actually looking at conversions. Like, is this VA effective doing lead generation? Because as we all know, when we say lead generation, that's actually getting you a business or sales, right? So the client said it's not working, but the VA said actually, oh, I'm doing what I was told. So guess what's missing? It's outcome clarity. That's why with our previous episode, we always say that, always set expectations straight to your team member. And, often that it comes, it would be like no one owned the results.
And, it's funny because as an Airbnb host myself, so I invest in short-term rentals or Airbnbs. I have virtual assistants that help with not just the guest communications, but the whole operation from end to end when it comes to short-term rentals. That was the whole role to begin with. Now, I had an instance where, there's something that happened with the lock box or the keypad, I should say, in this case, and the guest couldn't get in. And my VA, just thought, well, I didn't see that their part to anticipate guest needs is part of the job and getting in front of it. So it's a big picture. It's knowing, the whole experience is yours alone when you are fulfilling a certain role, not just a task of communication. So but here's the thing though, it wasn't my virtual assistant's fault. I needed to really instill within her, the full scope of what the work was or is, because it makes sense. You can't, if you're trying to eat if you're trying to make a root beer float, you need ice cream to make it a float. Otherwise it's just root beer. So that's a funny analogy, and clearly I love food, but that's essentially what it is too with delegation and making sure that your team members know not just what the tasks are, but what the job actually is behind it all.
Yes, that's right. I totally agree with that. And I wanted to share a growth moment from early days of our organization or our company Bravo. And we had this one VA who was amazing, was very skilled, very organized, but she was waiting on the clients to check every step before moving. And the problem with that is actually no clear accountability. So even though tasks were assigned, they're using the right system, the right task management tool, the mental load was still on the client. And of course, as a result, it caused tension. And once we created the SOPs and set expectations like you own this process from A to Z, including reporting back, everything changed. That's why it's really important to have that initial conversation to every team member that, okay, I'm not going to expect you to do this. I'm not going to assign you to do this if I haven't told you the first place. So you always, you know, make sure that that is properly communicated. That's why, again, let's talk back about SOPs. One of the things that you must make sure when you're creating an SOP is that it is approved by your manager or your leader in a way that it should be signed. And whenever that you change it, there should be like um change as of or updated as of and then the date. The reason behind that is because at least whoever is using the SOP knows when the process was updated and that is approved by the manager. I always tell the VAs that if you were assigned to handle an SOP, make sure that your clients approve it first. Make sure that it is signed if need, it's necessary for me because we also had this one instance step that the VA was assigned to do the SOP. They did it. It's very perfect. It's very seamless. The process is right there, but there's one step that was missed in the SOP, and the client was so frustrated that the process was wrong. So I asked the client, have you checked the SOP and have you approved it? Because if you set the expectations to your VA that, okay, just create an SOP and then that's it, without you reviewing it and approving it, that's a different story. It will give you a different result and maybe a result that is not, what we're expecting. So that's why we always make sure that we set system that, okay, if you're going to have your assistant do your SOP, make sure to review it and sign it. And then what we will tell our assistants is that unless it's signed, don't follow it. Even though you're the ones who did it. If it's not signed and approved by your client, don't follow it. Don't do it. So I think that's one of the greatest system that we created on how to create SOPs.
It's funny because SOPs comes from the corporate structure,
Yes.
and it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs resist. They resist the corporate structure because they themselves, maybe they've either worked in it before, or they just never wanted to. They wanted to be a free bird and build their own business. But this stuff works. There's a reason why corporates and I learned this because even though as a nurse, I actually also worked for an insurance company. I was working in corporate America with a healthcare background, and it was very eye-opening for me because they do it in the hospitals in such a different way that you don't realize it's corporate because you feel like, oh, it's just part of our check process, for medication pass, but it's the same thing. It's all a structure. And so in the corporate setting, that's a very common thing to make sure if there's an update, people sign off on it, you have checks and balances and whatnot. And entrepreneurs, I think what they mess up, especially in the beginning because they're so small, is they don't think of themselves as their own corporate structure. One, because there's the mental block of resisting anything corporate in the first place because they want to be something like Google or Facebook where it's super hip. And though this is probably shouting more towards the younger entrepreneurs, but I've seen older ones too that they're a very laissez-faire style of leadership. And for those who don't know what that means, is basically you're so laid back and relaxed that you don't have any oversight. You just let things run as they run and think that it's fine because you're giving everybody freedom. They should be happy. And they say that's actually the most inefficient way to be a leader. There's flexibility that you should have within your people and trust and empowerment, but there still has to be structure. So with the SOP, part of it, in order to get the results you want, like you said, it's important that, you check the work. And so I've personally learned, to embrace parts of the corporate structure that makes sense because they exist for a reason. These guys, these bigger companies got it right when they really made a curriculum of how they do everything. And that's basically what an SOP is from the get-go. And if you train your people this way and with the curriculum or SOPs in mind, it will make the delegation aspect much more clear because at the end of the day, it's expectations, right? So if you don't know what the role is and your viewer doesn't know what the role is, that's when things get super chaotic and miscommunications happen, and then that's when a lot of folks give up on it to begin with and think, oh, it's not for them. So, and it just needs refinement. Trial and error is probably the motto of a lot of entrepreneurs. Do something that sticks, but obviously do it with intention, and that's where the SOPs come in the first place. So, our next segment really is about how to reinforce this accountability without pressure.
Yes. So if you're a business owner listening to this and thinking, I've definitely been stuck in that loop, well, here are three things that help us and our clients reinforce accountability without micromanaging. Of course, who wants micromanaging, right? So even us business owners, when we were, way back in the corporate setup, we don't want our managers being micromanaged. And actually, you know what, Steph? That's the challenge. Um, to someone who is used in a corporate world and then shifted to hiring someone virtually because they were, they're so used to the corporate setup where they still treat the VA that or the assistant that they need to look like that they're still working like in the same office. If you remember this one client, Steph, I'm sure that you remember her. I'm not going to drop any names, but if I tell the story, you will definitely remember her. Do you remember this one client that we have? Do you remember this one client that we have where during the discovery calls? I mean, it's not during the discovery call, but during the interviews with the VA, what they wanted is that, oh, we want someone who can share screen for 8 hours, be in the Zoom room. Do you remember that
Yes,
stuff?
yes, I do. And okay, guys, we promise we're not, talking smack on anybody, but
Oh yeah.
this is real stuff, and behind the screens, the whole point is to pretty much just share with you what people like the things that we've experienced and things I think most people don't think about and should know if they really want to succeed when it comes to delegation and outsourcing virtually. So you might hear some snippets here and there about certain experiences, but we love all of our clients and our potential clients as well. But there's just some things you just can't make up. So I do 100% remember that.
Yes, and I think that the reason why I shared that because that's one question. That's the one thing that always comes to my mind, and there's always a question to follow that. Does micromanaging make people accountable? If you might, if you, I just wanted to clear that, especially on your side, Steph. We're talking here to each other as if that. I mean, because you are in a client, on the client perspective side, and I'm on the assistant perspective side. So, as a client or the business owner, do you think that if you micromanage someone, you are holding them accountable? You're making them more accountable for their jobs?
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't, and I that's not my style. And the reason why I say I don't think that micromanaging holds somebody more accountable versus not micromanaging is because at the end of the day, nobody likes to have someone breathing over their shoulder, whether this is literally or virtually. So because you have to remember what it feels like to be that person that on the other side too. I've been, I've had bosses and people that micromanage every single thing, and it's miserable.
Right.
It doesn't feel good. And that matters to your VAs, your employees. They have to feel good in their job and their role. If they don't have good feelings about you or the role in general, their performance suffers, job satisfaction suffers. You don't want to tape somebody and handcuff them to a desk. No one, it's not sustainable. And to me, that's bad bedside manner in the nursing world. So Yeah, you can't micromanage and think that it's going to hold somebody more accountable. My take on it is, besides fit, they have to want the outcome. They have to be inspired to do it. They have to feel good about it in general. And if they do, you get better results that way, because they're people. This is people management. These aren't robots. And so, and I think a lot of folks forget that virtually, because they don't see them, it's harder to make those relationship connections. So, yeah, that's my personal take on it.
Yes, and I would like to follow on that. I want to answer in a assistant perspective. I'll be very honest to this conversation and topic, like what's like the intent of this podcast. For us assistants, and I mean, for us who's working behind the screen, virtually, micromanaging equals toxicity for us. For us, if as assistants, we will give you all the things that you need to know about what we're doing. And I always set that expectations to the VAs as well, because there's a lot of times that a lot of our VAs are coming to us and saying that, oh, I cannot take it anymore because my client is micromanaging me, blah blah blah. But in our perspective as the management agency, I always ask the VAs as well that, are you actually giving what the client is asking you? Maybe because the reason why they're micromanaging, because you're not giving what you're supposed to deliver, right? Let's say, for example, this often happens when someone hires an executive assistant. One thing that's just to give a real life example, we have this one VA, and she's an executive assistant for a real estate agent. And as we know, in the real estate business, it's always a fast paced, it's a fast paced industry. Everything has to be um on time, the deadlines as well, because it's very important for us to process the real estate process, within the time frame, or else it will delay the property ownership or something. So this EA in particular was complaining that her clients keeps on checking on her, like, oh, where's this, where's that, something like that. And I was very clear to the VA that you must know that you're an executive assistant, not just an ordinary assistant. As an executive assistant, you have to act as if that you're working alongside with your clients. Okay, you're not just someone who's just watching them get things done, but you must also be the one directing them. Like the thing that I did with you, Steph. If like I have to tell you everything that you need to do, because that's my role as the executive assistant. And that's the reason why you hire an executive assistant. So it's basically the right hand, your right hand. So I always tell the VAs that if you don't want to be micromanaged, you have to do what you have to deliver. And besides, you accepted this job offer. We offered you the detailed job descriptions and expectations. And then you cannot just say that and come here and say, oh, I don't feel that we're working because he's micromanaging. Well, you have to give whatever they expected you to do. So just to give a right example, I always tell the VAs, in order for you to negate the micromanaging, you have to do it. You have to do the thing that you think would frustrate them, and that means you have to keep on updating them, because the client, let's say for example, this client keeps on texting her, calling her. Do the same thing every minute. Everything that you've done, like every task that you finished the entire day, call them, like text them, give them, do that first before your client does that. And it works, because eventually they will feel as well that you're accountable, because you're doing it alone without any guidance. You're actually doesn't need any managing at all, because you yourself as the assistant is already giving everything that they need to know. And also, one thing that I always encourage clients is to ask for end of day reporting. That's one thing. We have encountered a lot of clients who doesn't like task management tool. One thing that they complain about it is because it's too complicated to learn, even though it's not, but we cannot blame them. So they always stick with sending the task to WhatsApp, or just doing a voice record. There's a lot of hiccups on that kind of system. So maybe there's another conversation for that. But um, when it comes to delegating the task to the assistant, I always say to the clients to make sure that it's doable. Of course, it doesn't involve big decision making because often that causes delay of the process, and make sure that the assistant feels supported along the way. So I think for that, micromanaging for us, it depends. What I'm trying to say is that if you don't want to be micromanaged by your leader or your client, you have to give what you're expected to give or to deliver.
I really like that you brought that up because, to me, that's what sets us apart here at Bravo, because we really are seeing both sides of the coin here with
Yeah.
the intention of it being successful for both
Mhm.
teams. So, the anticipation, the mirroring, it's funny because, entrepreneurs, business owners, they provide a service also to other people. It's basically this huge chain. And one of the biggest things, and I'll say this from a business owner perspective, I have a different business where we serve elderly clients for basically long-term housing, and their families are always worried. So when we have move-ins and things like that, I know that the first 2 weeks to a month are the hardest, and that's the same thing too with hiring, because you don't the trust hasn't been built yet, so that communication is key, especially in the remote aspect behind the screens here. We don't know if it's radio silence, people panic. So
Mhm.
the fact that you mentioned that this is what we do for our VAs so that they can keep our clients satisfied, and it lessens that micromanaging. It takes really both sides and awareness of what it is, because I totally agree. Like with my own virtual assistants, it's something that had to get built. It's not an overnight thing. But you're totally right. If the result isn't there, you're going to get more questions. So, but on the other side, that I will say, for those of you here who are clients who have virtual assistants, you got to make sure you're giving really good instructions. So that kind of goes into, how do you delegate? Because that's where it starts. If you don't delegate something correctly and you don't get the result you want, that's really on you. That's the ownership part about this, is you did not give them the right tools or the resources to get them going. So we have a couple of different ways to reinforce accountability.
Yes.
One of them being outcome based delegation. And
Yes.
on this one, it's not just assigning the tasks, but it's assigning the results. And sometimes I prefer this type of delegation, but I know that there are sometimes you have to, it doesn't fit the actual task. So that's why there's different ways to do it. But when you're assigning the result of it, you give flexibility and freedom to your person to basically, however, whatever it takes to get to this result. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, there's more nuances involved because it depends on the project or the task at hand. But this is one form of delegation and outsourcing.
Exactly. So the second thing is also feedback loops built into the workflow, right? So for us, staff, we use Loom or Zoom video for updates. We always, like what I've mentioned earlier, we ask for end of day reporting, and even use of task management tool. Let's say like Monday.com or ClickUp dashboard, something like that. So if your team has a rhythm of checking in, you never have to chase. That's what I'm trying to say earlier, right? And I think another thing as well, lastly, is ownership documents and role clarity boards. And for, of course, every employee gets a full breakdown of what they own. There should be always someone who take responsibility for this particular task. So what success looks like and how it's measured, and it actually eliminates 90% of the I thought you were doing it convos, right? Sometimes it causes delays when you don't know how to how to identify who's assigned for this particular task. And that I just would like to follow up on the task management tool part. That's the power and the beauty of having a task management tool. because automatically you can put responsibility whoever your assistant is based on the instruction or task that you're going to assign to. That's what I like about it. Aside from that, it also has a feature where you can put level of urgency, also the due dates, even the time. And what's good with task management tool is that you can also sync that to your calendar. So if you're like a calendar geek, like you want everything to be in your calendar, you can definitely automate that. So it's not a hard thing to do, right? That's why part of the things that I always say to clients is that if you can delegate the task to WhatsApp or Slack, why not go ahead and go ahead straight to your task management tool? It works the same thing, right? So I think that's the top three things for us to reinforce. Um, us to reinforce accountability without micromanaging.
Yeah, and some examples too, because I know there's some listeners out here who they've never heard of what a task management tool was. To be honest, before I really started doing any sort of business or real estate investing, I was that person. I didn't know what a task management tool was. I just heard it through the grapevine and it sounded like a great idea. I was using pen, paper, and then some sort of like Google note taker checklist form. So, with the task management tool, some examples are ClickUp, Monday.com, Asana, Trello. They seem like really complicated things. There's free versions, paid versions, but think of it this way. If you're starting a business or you have a business and now you have somebody that you need to hire or delegate to or currently have, you start to really become obsessed with systems and processes, because otherwise, if you have a Google Doc here, you have a sticky note over here, oh, this one's on paper, which most entrepreneurs start with. I was guilty of that, and I've come a long way since then. I still have my things here and there, but you have to, it's a shortcut in a way, and it makes things much easier, because when there's communication gaps between you and your team, and even with yourself as a business owner, you it wastes time. You don't get things done, you forget about it. So having a great all-in-one place is is really crucial, and a lot of companies do have
Yes.
those systems within their corporate structure where they have things. So it's just something to consider. And one thing too, and I was guilty of this for a while, which was I didn't really use my task management tool. I got it, I said sure, let's do it, but then I still found myself texting myself things or writing it down. So don't be hard on yourself when you have, you're trying to adjust. It's a habit, and I say it's not just a habit for you, but it's a habit for your team. We're always going through a reconstruction in the business, and everyone can relate to that has people that help them. There's a new software that you have to learn for your company, or there's a new process, and in the beginning it's hard because people just aren't used to it. So have some patience, but also if you expect others to do it, you got to do it yourself too, because the line will break if there is a weak link. And for the leaders listening here, do not let that be you. Because and this is a shout out to those, because they sometimes they forget. So, and not to put more pressure on the clients out here, but it's a big responsibility that you take. So you really leading by example, even if it's imperfect, is imperfect action and patience, because your own team members, your VAs, things will fall through, but you probably also fell through on yourself. So you just course correct and get back on the horse and try again. So developing good habits takes time. And one of those really is, how to delegate. And first off, is it something that I should delegate in the first place? If so, how do I delegate it? What kind of project is this? And then am I giving this person all the resources that they need? Now, I have a question for you, Ina, because I noticed that different personalities have different ways of doing it when it
Okay.
comes to delegation. Some people, they do better with the step by step, you know, instruction, and then there's some that are like, tell me what the goal is, I'll get there. But the twist here is that for those delegating, sometimes they have one style and that's how they delegate. But
Yeah.
what happens when their VA doesn't receive that type of instruction that same way. They're a little bit more like the client is very outcome based delegation, but the VA, their style is more of a checklist style of tell me
Mhm.
step by step what to do. Like, how does that get overcome?
Well, in most case or the worst case scenario that we encounter is that they won't get the right results or the results that they want to happen because they missed some steps along the way. So for some clients who's more an outcome based type of delegating, for on the VA side, it's really hard. Again, you're especially if your VA is just starting working with you, they still don't know how you think, how you want things to get done. It's not something that they can just learn overnight. That once you hire them today and then tomorrow they know how you're think how they know already how the way you think. It doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of experiences, different tasks that you need to hand off to your VA, a lot of mistakes that needs to happen in order for your VA to learn. And also, that's another thing. If your VA is not a reader or observer, more of a type C or S personality, more on someone who's just, assigning the tasks, not a critical thinker, then it will lead to, not good results, not the results that you expected. So that's why during our assessments with our VAs, we always add personality tests, Steph, because we know what type of personality this VA is, and we know as well what the type of personality of our client is. And we know from there what system would work for them. Are they are they going to use a system in order for them to get things done? Or they will just, go with the flow because they have the same personality. It's different all the time, right? And one thing I always tell the clients, especially when you're hiring someone virtually, especially hiring someone in a different culture, so you have to learn their culture is as well. Like, what's your assistant used to work with? What's the current setup that's working for them? Because in that way, how, as the business owner, it's also your responsibility as the business owner to what you call this, get to know your team members. It's not just something like, oh, I hired you because you're an expert and you should know how I think, how I make decision. It doesn't work that way. We don't say here that we should say our team members is our family. I don't believe in that. I don't want you, Steph, to call me as your family because I've been working with you for a couple of years. Because one thing that the reason why we always say that we no, sorry, just the reason some of the leaders when they call their members like, oh, we're a family, that leaves an impression to the assistants that, oh, they cannot fire me whatever I do because they treat me as a family. And that's why I also don't believe that you should hire someone within your family members. That's one thing I've learned the hard way, because definitely you cannot fire them because they're family, right? So that's why I always tell clients, treat your team members as partners, not family. Be clear on that. Make sure that they have part in decision making. Ask their opinions as well. And of course, if you're going to ask the opinions of your assistant, ask what works for them. So if you hired an assistant who's more into a checklist type of person, accept it. Like, that's how it should be done. And once your assistant knows already how you make decision, what's that, because that's worked for us, Steph. Like before, when we don't have solid system with task management tools, we just talk, right, for for an hour or two through phone, and then I already get what you mean, because I myself, I'm an observer, and I can tell based on the need and the way of thinking, but not everyone is like me. So that's why I think learning your VA as well, or assistant, how things are working for them, is a necessity in order for the partnership to work. And for me, accountability is, should be clear. Your team becomes proactive, not reactive. That's where real growth happens.
It's funny because um, in the beginning, I know a lot of clients, when they first have someone on their team, they themselves don't know how to act. It's foreign to them. And those who, once they have, they've gone through a couple of different rounds, like they start to kind of get it. So from the
Mm-hmm.
client perspective, it's they kind of go back and forth of like, how professional should I be towards my VA, how personable. I don't want them to be scared of me, but I also need to know, I want them to know that, like, hey, this is a business. So it's a very fine line, because one thing I like that you mentioned, or I find that's very interesting, is that the family talk. And I do think there is a cultural consideration in that too, because there are some cultures that when they hear those things, they really do take it verbatim. I know here in the States, it's more loose. It's a loose term. So because there's a different understanding that when you say you're like family in a job setting, or or to somebody else, they know that that means that I care about you. That's that translation of like family. And I do that too. But my verbiage I tend to use when I'm actually talking to I call them teammates. We're a team. It's like a basketball team, basically. You have the coach, and you have like the different, even point guard, team captain, whatever you want to call it, like that. You're on the same team. I prefer that style, because now there's a goal that we're going after, or a result of some sort, and we're going in the same direction. So I like that term, because teams are like families, but they aren't legit, blood related. But I do think that sometimes people, they don't think about those different contexts, because yeah, there's different cultures in different places. And I think it's funny. I've actually looked at videos of how different cultures work with those that I'm team members with, simply because I realized I have said things, and this is more for my in-person staff, but I can see how it reminded me of situations with virtual staff, where I was like, oh, I said that, and I wondered if they took it this way, because I got a reaction I wasn't expecting. And so there's a lot of self-reflection here. And from the leadership perspective, yeah, you're right. Your job is to adapt to other personalities. You have to know your people as much as you have to give them permission to get to know you too. So for clients, especially in the beginning, and I tend to be, my style is like, hey, look, I'm trying to be as transparent, because at the end of the day, it doesn't do anybody any good if we're holding on to things. And my hope is that you'll help me personally, because with virtual assistants, especially on the executive assistant side, I they knew from the beginning, and I tell clients this, is that for this to work, you have to let them get to know you, flaws and all. You don't have to be perfect to your team. They have to really see you for who you are and how you think, because then they'll be able to understand what it is that you mean when you say certain things or refer. Um, with an executive assistant, 100%, that's your number two, your right hand person. So it is personal. So I find clients, they struggle, because they're like, oh, we need to just be professional, and I'm like, of course there's professionalism, but if you're not being open and doing it in such a way that's approachable, it's going to be really hard for the relationship that you have with your people to grow, because that's again what it is. It's people, it's not robots. So, but I always think that a lot of folks on the client side, and it's so overwhelming for them, they themselves, there's two types that I've noticed. One where they truly want to do a good job. They don't want to be a bad boss. They want their people to be happy, because they care about their business and the organization and the culture that they grow. Those are great people, because you can tell, like, this is who you would want to work with. But then there's the other set of folks that, you know, they're a little bit more mechanical. They see it as a transaction. And we're talking recurring roles here, right? Not just a project.
Yeah.
So uh, I find for those who are a lot more transactional, mechanical, they tend to struggle, and they tend to go through a lot more turnover, simply because they don't think any further than just the task at hand. And retention is much shorter versus those that really uh, give permission to both themselves and their VA to have an openness, so that they can communicate together. But so that's something that I really liked that we mentioned here, because I think a lot of listeners, they don't realize these things. So that's what behind the screens is, guys. In order for you to have success in your business and make sure you get the right hire, there's a lot of components to think about. So again, accountability isn't just pressure, it's structure. And that structure is what creates the freedom for your people to succeed in in your business so that they can grow. You know, there's a saying that I heard from someone once that your dream, your vision is so big that I was able to fit mine into yours. And I thought that was one of the coolest things I've heard, because that's the
Like
goal of a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the solo ones. They want to build this vision. And when they get that first hire and even their second, it starts to unravel, that, hey, you can have what you want if you're with me. And I love that perspective. So I figured I'd share that with everybody.
I like that. So yeah, you have to share your vision as well to your team members. That's why every company has a vision, mission, and core values, right? It's a must for every businesses, that even whether you're just starting a small business and you don't have any people yet, start it with yourself as the business owner. Have a vision, have a mission, and have a core values as well, so that what type of assistant or team member would be fit for your business as well. And again, when we say creating core values, mission, vision, it's how you envision your business and how you want it to for other people to look at it. And for me, I think we have, like what I've mentioned earlier, when accountability is clear, your team becomes proactive and not reactive, and that's where we will see the real growth happens.
Yep. So um, this is your action step, guys, from Behind the Screens podcast. Audit your delegation system. Ask yourself, who owns this? Do they know what success looks like? Is it documented, reviewed, and supported? You can't go wrong if you start with those. You will evolve and grow into your own way of doing it, but that's a good starting point for, I think, a lot of our listeners here.
Exactly. So no more vague task lists, no more guessing games. Clarity is, leadership. You always have to be clear whenever you delegate something, whether it's a small or simple task, even to the biggest projects that you will have. Always make sure that that there's clarity for every task that you will give to your assistant.
All right, so that's a wrap, everyone. Share this episode with a fellow short term rental host, real estate team, small business owner, anybody in leadership with a remote team, and tag us when you do.
Yes. See you next time on Behind the Screens.
Behind the Screens podcast.